computer. Here we go. So hi, everybody. I'm so glad to have you here, and I'm particularly glad to have poet and liturgist Alden Solovy as our guest today. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background. You all have probably heard a lot of his poetry and prayers because I use them all the time in my services. So he spreads joy and excitement for prayer.
Yay.
He's a liturgist and a poet, and his work has been used by people of many faiths throughout the world. Hi, could people mute themselves, please? Because I hear somebody doing something. I don't know who it is. Thank you. He's written more than 750 pieces of new liturgy, offering a fresh Jewish voice, challenging the boundaries between poetry, meditation, personal growth, storytelling, and prayer. He's a teacher, a writing coach, and an award-winning essayist and journalist. And in 2019 to 2020, he was a liturgist in residence at the Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies in Jerusalem. Alden's writing was transformed by multiple tragedies, unfortunately, marked in 2009 by the sudden death of his wife from a catastrophic brain injury. As a result, he deepened his exploration of meditation, poetry, liturgy, and personal prayer as a healing spiritual practice. His third book, This Grateful Heart, Psalms and Prayers for a New Day, was released in 2017 by CCR Press. And his fourth book, This Joyous Soul, A New Voice for Ancient Yearnings, was released by the CCR Press in 2019. And the fifth volume was released in 2022, I think. And he's saying, and he just told me before we started that that was really his best work. And if he stopped now, he would feel very fulfilled. He says, I'm sorry, Rabbi Meira Ilinsky in a review said, I'm packing this grateful heart into my disaster survival kit. The Jerusalem Post called his work soulful, meticulously crafted. The Huffington Post Religion said, the prayers reflect age-old yearnings in modern-day situations. About his Haggadah companion, Meditations and Readings, New York Jewish Week declared, this is Pesach poetry. And all of his books, of course, are available on Amazon and through the CCAR Press, books that they've published. And of course, his work has also been widely anthologized, including Men Pray and Choosing a Jewish Life by Anita Diamond, which some of you have seen, as well as these CCAR Press books, Gates of Shabbat, Mishkan Refuah, where healing resides, Mishkan Avelut, where grief resides, the Holzman 8 for Sacred Moments, a rabbi's manual, and Mishkan HaNefesh, a new machzor, which is the machzor that we use at the high holidays. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Alden Solovy.
Well, hello. Thank you all for having me. Thank you, Rabbi, for that lovely introduction. I'm going to make one little correction, and that is it's actually the next book, the one that's coming out like in a month, which will be my fourth CCR Press volume that I consider my best work. I could retire on that one. Not going to, but I could. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. I know we're all adult learners, and therefore, you know, the choice is yours. And for me, it is really helpful to see as many people as possible. So to the extent you're willing and able to put on your camera or keep your camera on, that would be really lovely for me. It's just one of those things that helps the flow of the energy, I think, perhaps with everyone. I like conversation, learning together, as opposed to an hour of, you know, just subjecting you to me. So I am going to invite you in to conversation. We are talking about Shabbat, and the two sessions are roughly divided between thematics, which is our session tonight, and liturgy, which is our session. I guess it's this morning, your time. And liturgy, which is next time. It's kind of fun to be doing this on Erev Rosh Chodesh. It will be Rosh Chodesh tonight, Shvat, when the sun sets. So there's something particularly holy about our time together, which I appreciate. So let me start by reading one of my favorite Shabbat pieces, just to get us in the mood. It's called "Come, Beloved." If you listen, listen. If you listen, you will hear Shabbat descend from her distant place, gently clearing the air of the steady buzz of the mundane, gently inviting you to stillness, gently preparing the space for the arrival of holiness. If you listen, listen. If you listen, you will hear the arrival of luminous wonder, a radiance of glory that touches your heart, so that love pulses through your veins, the gates of your soul burst open, you run through them, skipping, singing, Maher, Ahuv, hurry, beloved, how long since your hands touched mine, how long since your lips brushed these tired eyes, how long since I rested in you, Kiva Moed, for the time has come to reunite, and tears of surrender, shimmering with the taste of honey, will pour through you like grace from God's ancient well. V'chaneni kimei olam. If you listen, listen, listen.
Beautiful.
Thank you. So I'd like to start with you with a question. What memories of Shabbat do you have that enliven your feelings about Shabbat, your connection with Shabbat? What is it that brings you to Shabbat with a particular sense of your spirituality, your Jewish life? And I'm just opening this up to anyone who cares to jump in. Either just take yourself off mute and jump in, or raise your hand, whatever works for you. If it's a particular, yeah, Ruth.
I just find it so helpful every Friday night Shabbat, lighting the candles, saying the Kiddush, baking hamotzi. It's something that traditionally we've done for so many years, both in my family and with my husband over many years, even when he was quite ill, when he wasn't able to do anything. He was able to come and join in and say the prayers. And it made it such a special time. And even now, if I'm by myself in the house, I still do it, and then go to shul if I can, or Zoom, whatever. But it really has meant so much to me from the days that my father and mother, it has always been part of our lives. And so I'm very grateful for it. And it does make Shabbat very special for me.
Lovely, beautiful. Thank you, Ruth. Others?
For me, Shabbat means Torah study. And I was not able to practice my religion as a youngster. We were in the Holocaust, and it has I probably don't follow all the rules. In fact, I shouldn't say probably, I don't. But it has a deep meaning of Judaism to me.
Neither do I. Thank you, Suzanne. Someone else?
For me, Shabbat is the way of closing one week and opening what's possible to come. But the light is the thing that I remember the most always, is just feeling suffused with lightness. which is incredible if you've had a week, whatever. And there it is. It's eternal. It's there. It's, you can watch it. You can just feel it, and it is a tremendously hopeful feeling for me. And that's why I've done it since college, although I really haven't been a Jew for very long. In my heart I have, but technically it's been more recent. But it's that feeling of like, okay, let's just consolidate, let's feel it, let's enjoy and be grateful for the community that we have and that we have survived.
Fabulous. Thank you. Carol Lee, were you up? And then Randy's up. Were you?
Well,
Go ahead, Carol Lee.
You want me to?
Yeah.
I have for years said I go to temple to sing. To sing the prayers that I've sung since my childhood, and to learn more about Judaism, which is very, very important to me, and I hope my family. That's why I go to temple, really, to sing.
Beautiful. Thank you. Randy. And let me remind folks that while you're not speaking, to put yourself on mute, please. Randy.
Thank you. My partner was in the process of going through the conversion experience, and I was responsible for setting up Shabbat. At the time, I was Reverend Randy Lester Wilson, and so that was my introduction to the Jewish Sabbath, and that was back in 1995. No, I take that back. It was in a different year. I don't remember when that was. Anyway, flash forward, I officially converted to Judaism. It was June 17th of 2003, and headed down the path of studying to become a rabbi, and that changed to chaplaincy. And so your work has been a part of my process in that it has given words, whereas I used to pray extemporaneously. And the work that you have done has given voice to what is inside. And I didn't know that I had that freedom within Judaism to express that in a more, I don't want to say, well, it's heartfelt. The keva and the kavanah are there. And so Shabbat was the beginning, and it continues to influence my soul, and it's a very important and integral part of my living the life as a Jew.
Can I add
Anyone
something?
else? Yeah, please.
So I think of Shabbat as a time of renewal and a time to, Christine mentioned gratitude, but gratitude for everything, because I think we don't stop to smell the roses most of the time. I include myself in that. I'm always busy. I always have a million things to do. And it's really important to stop and say, wow, I have so many blessings that I'm not paying attention to and not giving credit to, and just need to take that breath and feel all of that.
Fabulous. Anyone else? Whether your camera is on or off. So,
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm Melissa McKeith, and I'm in bed, so my camera is not coming off,
okay.
or on, I should say. I converted to Judaism under Rabbi Singer in about 2019, 2018, can't remember but even before then, we started to celebrate, actually celebrate Shabbat in our house. Now, I live with someone who's not Jewish, but Friday afternoons at 3, I turn on the temples from New York City. I start making bread. Dinner is done about 7 o'clock. I then tune into Temple Bethel, and it has become a really something wonderful to look forward to, and also just the stopping of time. When I can, I do Torah with us on Saturdays, but I don't actually do any work on Saturdays. And so that part's nice in terms of taking the time off, but it's still the lighting of the candles and the routine of closing the week and having a time at home that is a precious time. And as Ruth said, I'm sure in years to come, I will look back and think that was, a very important way to spend time. So thank you for doing this today.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you. Anyone else? So hearing none, as we're going to jump into the thematics of Shabbat. As I said, next week we'll do liturgy. So another operational note, and that is when I start to share screen, it's going to be harder for me to see chat and see raised hands. So Rabbi is going to help me out, and you all will help me out, because the conversation is what's important. It's my style to stop and take the screen down and check in also. So if you're missed, there will be frequent check-ins as we begin. So let's jump in to I have some odd thing on my screen. Let's try this one more time. There we go. Okay. So we're going to talk about themes of Shabbat. So this is an overview. There are 5 principles of Shabbat: rest, menucha, joy, oneg. Now, note that there's always food at an oneg. That's because the rabbis associated fine food and fine beverage with joy. So you can't have an oneg without food. Community, as you've all said, sacred time, and mein olam haba, a taste of the world to come. The rabbis say that Shabbat is 1/60th. That's sort of rabbinic code math for there's just a taste of the world to come in every Shabbat. So mein olam haba, there's a hint of the world to come in every Shabbat. 2 mitzvot, observe and remember. We'll talk about that. 2 remembrances. The first Shabbat and Exodus, sort of, and the Exodus. A hint of that, of the liturgy piece, is you'll remember from from the Friday night Kiddush, we say Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim and Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshit. So we say as a remembrance of the Exodus and a remembrance of creation. So both of those 2 things are held. We'll talk about that a little bit. 2 mindsets that I've heard some of you mention: delight in creation and the suspension of time. The metaphors, wholeness and peace, and romance and wedding. We find that in prayers like Lecha Dodi and the opening song of the classic Kabbalat Shabbat Yedid Nefesh. This idea of romance wedding we will talk about next week. A hint is that, in fact, the rabbis saw Shabbat as a marriage of cosmic proportions, and we will get there. The wearing fine clothing, the gift of an extra soul, the neshama yetera. We will talk about that today, and angels of blessings, which again gets reflected in our songs with Shalom Aleichem. So that's an overview, sort of core themes of Shabbat. It was really gratifying actually to hear most of them touched in one way or another in your comments. So 10 Commandments shows up twice, as you know, in Torah. In Exodus, Shabbat is Zachor et Yom HaShabbat l'kadsho, Sheshet Yamim Tavod Vasita Kamalachtecha. For those of you who know the more traditional Shabbat morning Kiddush, it starts with V'shamru, then this paragraph is read, and then the Kiddush is said. So let's look at it in English. And there are two things about this, two questions. What is the action and what is the rationale? So, and this is a question I'm posing to the group. What is sort of the action that's requested or commanded, and what is the rationale? Anyone? I see Carolee moving for the microphone.
Well, the action is to remember.
Great. So the action here is Zachor, remember. Gotta dive into what are we actually remembering, but the action is remember. And what's the rationale?
To remember.
If you
that's
don't
the action.
Yeah, if you don't reflect, if you don't take time to appreciate and reflect, then the meaning of everyday life drops out.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And what I'm doing is very particular Torah study work, which is asking, what do we see in the text? Not what have we learned from our theology? What do we believe about Shabbat? What's the impact about Shabbat? But specifically, what do we see in this text as the rationale for remembering the Sabbath day?
God did it, so we should do it too.
Okay, you shall not do any work. God rested. That's the preamble, if you will, to the exact rationale.
It's holy.
It's holy. We don't have the word holy. We have holy somewhere else. We don't have it here.
What do you mean we don't have it here? Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy.
Oh, there you go. Right. I'm thinking about it as a right. Todah. My head went to a different passage. Okay, what am I fishing for as the rationale? It's for in 6 days the Eternal made heaven and the earth. That's the rationale. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. For in 6 days the Eternal made heaven and earth and rested, which one of you already said. But this connects, if you will, remember and creation, and is reflected in our Kiddush when we say Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshit, as a remembrance of creation. So I want to set this aside for just a second and go to the next passage, 10 Commandments in Deuteronomy, and we're going to do the same thing here. Shamor et Yom HaShabbat l'kadsho. Sheshet Yamim Tabod Vasit Shamor et Yom HaShabbat l'kadsho. Kasher Siva Adonai Sheshet Yamim. Blah blah blah. And here it is in English. What's the action and what's the rationale?
The action God has commanded. Whoops.
Anyone? You got to look at the difference between the two passages.
The rationale is that God freed us from Egypt.
The rationale is God freed us from Egypt. What's the action?
Remember and honor it.
Well, it says observe.
It has commanded. There's a commandment, an action there. Whoops.
So the difference between these two passages are Shamor et Yom Shabbat L'Kadsho and Zachor et Yom Shabbat L'Kadsho. Observe and remember. In the observe structure, we get Zecher L'Maseh, we get Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim. In the remember paragraph, we get Zecher L'Maseh Bereshit, as remembrance of creation. So what's the difference between observe and remember?
Remember is a passive thing. You do it yourself. To observe, you have to do something more active. You have to actually have a way of observing.
Lovely, lovely. Let's try to deepen that a little bit.
Oh, me?
Anyone?
Well, that's why we have services to observe, besides doing it in the house.
So we're trying to tease out the difference between observe and remember.
I would say that remember is internal and observe is external.
Yes, yes,
Beautiful, lovely.
yes.
Okay. Anything else?
So we're sort of doing both of them when we go to observe Shabbat. We are remembering the past and remembering the songs. Well, for me, it's remembering all the songs and then observing in the present. We're sort of doing both, using both of these.
Lovely, lovely. Let's hear from someone else for a second. The difference between observe and remember, and let's try to connect it to the action with the rationale. We remember and that God rested. Go ahead.
One is more passive and one is more active.
Great. That builds on what was said already. Fabulous. Observe is the action around Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim as a remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt, and Shamor. Did I get that backwards? I'm going to have to jump on the share screen to make sure. Right. So observe is Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim, and Shamor, remember, is Zecher L'Maseh Bereshit. That is remembrance of creation. All right. Here's what I'm driving towards. Remember the unique, singular, only Sabbath that ever occurred. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy as a remembrance of creation. So one thing we are asked to do is to keep the first Sabbath holy, the only one that ever happened and the only one that ever will, the first Sabbath in which God rested. Remember that Sabbath, to keep it holy. Then we are asked to observe the Sabbath, this Sabbath, the one we're coming up to, the one we have, the one we are in, as a remembrance of our Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim, of our exodus from Egypt, that we were freed from slavery in order to live in service to God. So we remember this particular Sabbath and the next Sabbath, or pardon me, observe the Sabbath by doing those things, all those things you said, by lighting candles and going to services and taking part in the tradition. So we actually have two things or two aspects of holiness that we are protecting. One is the holiness of the original day of Shabbat, the only first day of Shabbat, and we are keeping holy the Shabbat when it comes to us. How do we know which day is Shabbat? How do we know? In Torah, we're told Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shavuot, Pesach, they're all tied to the moon. All we have to do is look out the window and be able to count to 12 or 13 in a leap year. And we pretty much know when the festivals are. But how do you know when the seventh day is? The seventh day from what? So here's how we know. We got told what day the Sabbath is when God gave us manna. The seventh day after the first appearance of manna was the first observed Shabbat by the entire nation of Israelites. And ever since then, every seventh day has been Shabbat. So the Shabbat was actually given to us or picked for us by God. And we know that in a sense, it's the weekly anniversary of the Israelites taking a break from picking up manna in the wilderness. So God sets Shabbat for us. We are in partnership with God around every other festival. It's around our observation of the moon, or now our calculations and science around the moon. But God picked the day of Shabbat for us. Now I'm going to stop, as I promised, and check in and ask thoughts, comments, questions. Rabbi, you're on mute.
Yeah, I know. I never asked myself that question. How do we know when Shabbat is? And I never heard that it was based on the manna. Where did you find that? That's really interesting.
That's I don't have the citation, but that is a
Midrash.
But it makes just so much logical sense.
Right. If we're supposed to remember the exit from Mitzrayim, then obviously manna is connected to that. So that makes a lot of sense. Really interesting. Thank you for that
It's
insight.
the first time we get the counting of the 7 days in all of Torah.
That's amazing.
Now, the Mefarshim, the early commentators will say, we'll ask the question, did Adam observe and Eve observe Shabbat in the garden? And of course they want the answer to be yes, because, of course, Adam and Chava were Jewish. Of course. But did Abraham, even though Avraham Avinu, did Abraham, our father, observe all of the mitzvot? Of course, even before they were all given.
Right.
Abraham knew them all. That's fine. There's some beautiful poetics and ideas around that. But in terms of just what we see in Torah, if we're going to be, if we're going to use the word that appears there, we know it's Shabbat. We know that Sunday today, right? Yesterday was Shabbat because the Israelites took a break from gathering manna in Egypt.
Interesting.
in
Thank
the
you.
desert. Any other thoughts or comments before we sort of push in? We are way behind. But of course,
you can
you
take
always,
more time.
there's always more to learn, as you know. We'll go over a little bit. Thank you, Rabbi. So let's go back to our screen share if there are no other comments. So this is the first mention of Shabbat in all of Torah. And we know it because this is the preamble to the Friday night Kiddush. Now the heaven and the earth were done, and on the seventh day, God completed the work that had been done, and then blessed the seventh day and made it holy, and ceased from all the creative work that God had done. It's a fascinating passage when we start to look at it. There's something redundant in this passage, and there's something missing from this passage. If anybody wants to take a stab at what's redundant about this passage, or duplicative might be a better word, or what's missing, fabulous. But it is not, it is based on the text.
Well, is it redundant to say that it's holy? Because we already know that.
It is redundant to say that Yivarech Elohim et Yom HaShvi vayikadesh oto. God blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. What does it mean to bless it and make it holy? If you make it holy, isn't it already blessed? Or if it's blessed, isn't it already holy? So the rabbis, of course, want to know what it means to be both blessed and holy. So that's the sort of the, call it the duplication or the redundancy or the curiosity that comes out of both those words showing up. So
would that be based on what the word holy actually means in that context?
Could be. The rabbis go in a different direction with this, but yeah, I like it. What's missing? This is always a harder question, right? It's easier to see something that's there than like what's not there. But you have to go ahead.
What about, well, it mentions what God does, but it doesn't mention what we're supposed to do.
Okay, that's lovely.
That's not what you're looking for.
It's not obvious from the text. And the difficulty here is you have to think back in the text. This is the beginning of chapter 2 of Breshit. You have to think about what's going on in chapter 1 to figure out what's missing here. Vahier, vahivoker.
Yeah, I did, but that's okay. I can have another one. Thank you. Oh.
Morning and evening,
Every other day.
evening and morning.
Ends. Every other day ends with there was evening, and there was morning, some so and so day. Here it ends. God blessed the seventh day, made it holy, and ceased from all creative work that God had done, and then we're off. So we're missing that structure, and there was evening and there was morning the seventh day, or there was evening and there was morning Shabbat to close the day. So that's also, the rabbis find that very interesting. So let's go back to that for just a second. There is a midrash that says that Shabbat was actually 36 hours of pure light. Note that Adam v'Chava, Adam and Eve, would not have experienced a sunset yet. They were created on the 6th day. Then there's Shabbat. If the day of Shabbat is 36 hours of pure light, then by the end of Shabbat, as the sun was setting, it would be the first time they experienced darkness. And the Midrash says that they were afraid. They were afraid that this was the end of the world. And at that point, God gives them the ability, this is our fire myth in Midrash, gives them the ability to make fire, and they create a torch to light the way, and so they would know that the world was not coming to an end. Note that we end Shabbat with a torch in Havdalah. It must have a minimum of two wicks that are connected, and so on. So from this passage, in a sense, we get our fire creation myth, but we also get the idea of the Havdalah candle. Any thoughts, comments, questions from here, or shall we? So the rabbis asked this question about blessed and holy. And they asked the question, what is the extra blessing that Shabbat gets? And from the Talmud, Bavli, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says, God gives everyone a neshama yetera, an extra soul on Shabbat. That's the blessing of Shabbat, that we are imbued with something soulful that is special and beyond the soul that we normally carry with us. So that's the blessing. The Ramban goes on to say, well, why did God bless the Sabbath? Because it has no partner. The first day has the second day. The third day has the fourth day. The fifth day has the sixth day. The seventh day has no partner. So the congregation of Israel will be Shabbat's partner. And that, Ramban says, is when you understand that, you understand that the Shabbat is truly an extra soul for the Jewish people. Some might say that because of the parallelisms, that the first day of creation is partnered with the fourth day, and the second with the fifth, and the third with the sixth. Doesn't matter. Every day of creation, but Shabbat has a partner, and we are partnered with Shabbat, and that brings an extra soul. So there are 5 names in Hasidic names of the soul, different types, different levels of the soul, and Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Lady says that the soul that we get is actually the highest level of soul, Yechidah. It is the opportunity to have a total unity with God, not 2 separate objects that are tied together, but a complete unity is possible. So he says it is not felt as an increase in physical life, but rather an increase in the spiritual life force. I would say that this helps me understand why Shabbat just feels different. You know, if I sing the Shabbat songs on a Tuesday night, it's lovely, but it doesn't feel the same in my experience to singing the Shabbat songs together in community on a Friday night. And I think some of that can be ascribed to this neshama Yetera. Now here's a different view of it, and then I'll open it up for conversation. Art Green, a neo Hasidic rabbi, says that that this is not some extra soul that floats down from heaven. Rather, because Shabbat brings the peace of Shabbat to us, that we are prepared. There is a part of us that is hiding that has the opportunity to come out and be visible and join with us. So whether you're more of a mystical classicist and believe that a soul comes, from Shabbat, or that something is opened inside us, to me, it's just a lovely metaphor for the energy and the beauty and the joy of Shabbat. I'm going to check in again and see if there are any thoughts or comments around Neshama Yetera.
I love what Art Green has to say, that it's not something that's imposed on us, that it's there, but we don't allow it to come out except on Shabbat. That's when it's safe.
So,
oh,
go
sorry,
ahead, Christine.
One of the reasons that it's so fortifying is that whatever is going on around us that involves us or tries to trample our spirit or whatever, it's always there. It's sustaining. It is there. And at Shabbat, wherever we are and whatever is happening to and with us, we have that. And it is something which is expressed in community best. But I'm thinking of people who were trying to be human in inhuman circumstances. And it's that transcendence of the mundane that is also always with us. And it's a reminder of that. That's another memory that we're supposed to carry with us.
Thank you. Other comments?
You guys should let out your inner souls and not be afraid to speak.
So let's jump. Here's an interesting word play that the rabbis do. The Shamru V'nei Yisrael, we sing this on Shabbat often. The Shamru V'nei Yisrael, the Shabbat Lasod, the Shabbat L'dor Tambrito. Listen to how it ends. It ends, Uvayom Hashvi'i Shavat Vayina Fash. Now, what the rabbis notice is that this word Vayinafash has the same Vayinafash, refreshed, has the same root as nefesh or soul. And in their word playing, what they do is they make it into oy nefesh. Oy nefesh. This is from the Talmud Bavli. The Holy One gives someone an additional soul on Shabbat. And we know that because we say oy nefesh at the end of Shabbat when that soul is lost or returned to God. So when I was a kid, my father would keep smelling salts in his talit bag for Yom Kippur. And if somebody got faint, he would have the smelling salts to wave under their nose. In fact, Mishnah Torah says that the spices, the spice box that we breathe in after Shabbat is to cheer up the soul. It's our smelling salts over the departure of the soul, the extra soul of Shabbat. It is to cheer us up over the sadness of the departure of that soul and the Sabbath. So really, so we have two of our rituals for Havdalah have some intimations from these verses, both this fire mythology of Shabbat lasting 36 hours and Adam v'Chava, Adam and Eve, being frightened at the end of that, and the loss of the soul, the additional soul bringing the spice box in order to cheer us up. Thoughts, comments, questions?
But it's not really departed. It's, if you will, it's gone back into its little hobbit hole, you know, inside inside us until the next Shabbat. You know, so it's not really mourning because it really hasn't departed, but it's not forefront at all times, and it's sad that it can't be with us in the forefront all the time.
Other thoughts or comments?
I just think it's a beautiful way of thinking about Shabbat.
Thank you, Sandra. Others? Who hasn't spoken or hasn't spoken in a while who'd like to jump in? Yeah, Dean.
Deanne, and I was thinking about the peace that I feel during Shabbat, and a peace that I've never felt before. I converted 11 years ago, and I remember the honoring the first Shabbat service was as if there was an experience inside of me that I hadn't felt, a level of peace. Just also, maybe there's a little bit of a grief process. So when Shabbat is over and we get back to work, then it's like, oh, okay. So we in a way move from a space of that peacefulness to, is it more engaging our thoughts? Like, okay, we have things now we have to do. And maybe there's a little bit of grief, and that's the spices are like, okay, maybe waking us up a little bit or cheering us up as we go into the work week, I suppose. Those are my thoughts.
Lovely, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nia. Others who haven't.
Was there someone? I heard someone trying to speak. Melissa, go
Hi.
ahead.
Thanks, Suzanne, Rabbi. So I similarly at the end of Shabbat, I had some questions about Havdalah, because though I'm very organized and consistent about opening Shabbat, I have not really come up with a ritual for the closing of Shabbat. And there's no doubt at the end of the day, one, you have to go back to reality. You don't have this great, I don't want to call Shabbat an excuse, but you know, for the first time in my career, I've been able to decide, you know, it's okay. I don't have to do all this stuff on a Saturday or worry about things. I can just take a deep breath and put matters in perspective. So it is going back into the real world. But if you could just say a word perhaps about Havdalah, and, you know, do many people observe it? How do they observe it? I liked the idea of the mystery of fire. That's the first time I'd you know, heard that, or if I'd heard it before, I'd forgotten. So I'd appreciate that.
So thank you for that. You know, Havdalah, you know, in my world in Jerusalem, it's pretty common. And there are a couple of ways, you know, to do it. One is simply to claim the Havdil, to say out loud, this is the distinction between holiness, the holy time and regular time, and simply mark it with a proclamation. And then there's the other end of that is the full ritual with wine and spices and flame and so on. But I think given a practice of bringing in Shabbat, even if it's just a moment to recognize, after sunset, that Shabbat has left, might add a certain kind of a meaning. I'm aware of our time, and I hope that was Melissa, sufficient enough answer for now. Let's
Thank you.
jump back for just a second. So we have this idea of Shabbat angels. And this, our song, Shalom Aleichem, comes from this. 2 minutes during angels accompany a person home from services on Shabbat evening, the good angel and not so good angel, evil angel. And when the good angel sees that the house is prepared for Shabbat, the good angel says, may it be God's will, may it be your will that it should be like this for another Shabbat. The evil answer is compelled to answer, amen. And if it is not set up for Shabbat, the evil angel says, may it be your will that this be so for another Shabbat. And the good angel, against its will, is compelled to say, amen. So in Shalom Aleichem, we invite the angels in to see the loveliness of Shabbat in our own home. This I find even more interesting and more compelling. Remember that paragraph, Mar Ukva says that one who recites these 2 minutes during angels, place their hands on the head and says all iniquity has passed and your sin is atoned. That this prayer, saying this prayer on Shabbat, has the power of bestowing forgiveness. It's mythology, of course. It's angels, it's blessings, and the notion of this, that actually choosing to engage with Shabbat has a power of sort of healing the soul, or a power of healing that part of me that still, is drawn to, my lesser self, not my best behaviors, and so on. That Shabbat actually has a healing property, I find remarkable. In fact, the rabbis felt this was so important that in a classic Friday night service, there's 3 opportunities to say or hear this prayer. And they take it a step further, that one who recites this prayer and the heavens and the earth were finished should be read as, and the rabbis do this word play thing all the time, as meaning essentially it should be considered that the one who says this prayer, and I'm going to use that as a proxy for one who observes Shabbat, is actually considered a partner with God in completing creation. And this gets back to the very beginning of our conversation when we say, what is, the action of remembering the Sabbath day? Well, it's remembering that first Sabbath. It's remembering the Sabbath, the only Sabbath in which God rested from the immediate work of creation. Other thoughts, questions, comments?
You had
So-
mentioned the experience of Havdalah in Jerusalem. Is your experience there in Ann Arbor this week and your collective experiences of Shabbat in Jerusalem, are they different based on an altered sense of community, or does that Shabbat feeling or however it manifests itself in your life, is it the same no matter where you are?
It's a great and difficult question.
Okay.
The short answer is it's very different. First of all, Jerusalem is Jerusalem. So one can actually feel the energy of Shabbat arriving, because Friday morning, there's a flurry of activity. Everybody's trying to get things done, and they're having family time, and they're shopping, and they're cooking. You can feel the energy in the air, and as the day progresses, it gets quieter and quieter and quieter, and you can actually hear and feel the arrival of Shabbat. And on the other end, the buses start running, and people, are rushing home if they've spent, if they're classically Shabbat observant, suddenly cars are going, and so on. So the energetics are very different. I also, my practice is supported by being in Jerusalem. I have, whether, and I go to a conservative and Orthodox and Reform congregation, and other places, there's just so many opportunities to learn and grow. And in each of them, there's an awareness of Shabbat that's very different. And I think that than what I experience here. Communities are built around spiritual and religious engagement in Jerusalem in a way that I haven't experienced. Maybe Sfat, although I've never lived in Sfat, I don't know, but in a way I haven't experienced anywhere else. So we are over time, and I try to be respectful. I want to thank everyone who participated in the conversation. Ruth, Suzanne, Christine, Carol Lee, Randy, Melissa, Deanne, Randy. I don't know. Did I get everybody? Harvey. Thank you all for your participation, Rabbi. And so next week, we're going to shift into liturgy. And we're going to look at this idea of Shabbat as a wedding of cosmic proportion. And we're going to do that through the lens of the Kabbalat Shabbat portion of our liturgy and our service. I hope this in some way enlivens and enriches your practice of and your thoughts about Shabbat. I'll be open to hear next time. Rabbi, anything else from you?
I just wanted to thank you for giving us all these new insights that we never had before, and hoping, because that was the question I was going to ask, but we can leave that for next time, is how do we get people here to observe Shabbat in a closer way to how it's experienced in Jerusalem? I mean, obviously, we're not living in a Jewish country with Jewish time, but, if you have any ideas, go ahead and throw them out.
I'm always big on food, but that is a classically Jewish answer. And it's a hard question in these, in between COVID times. It's a really hard question. I'll think about it.
Okay. I'm not sure COVID is the reason, but okay, we'll give that.
But it's harder. It makes it,
Yeah,
it makes it a little
it
more
does.
complicated.
It does.
Yeah.
So thank
It
you
was
so much.
disruptive. COVID was disruptive. So,
It
and
definitely
Zoom
was.
makes it easy.
It
Yes.
definitely was.
It's
So hope to see all of you next Sunday, same time, same place, same Zoom link, Carol.
Okay,
And Randy has written, this has been a blessing in the truest sense, and I wholeheartedly thank you and this holy community. So I'm going to stop recording, and then Alden, if you can stay on for just one sec. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.